Welcome, everybody, to Both Sides of the Story. I'm your host, Alan Janae from CBS 4. Thank you for joining us. Our special high school debate tournament continues, challenging our students and our viewers to look at important Colorado issues from both sides. Each student will offer a case, ask and answer questions of their opponent, and offer rebuttal. We'll also feature an expert judging panel that will chime in with questions of their own. Both students have prepared a pro and a con case for tonight's debate topic. They won't know which side they'll defend until we have a coin flip right here in our studio. Now, we've added a brand new element this year. This is our special tournament edition. 4 schools have competed so far, and the winners from those debates now compete in the semifinals, and ultimately, we will name a Both Sides of the Story champ. Tonight's semifinal match features students from the St. Mary's High School speech and debate team, as well as the Denver East forensics team. Now let's meet our participants. First, Colton Barta. He is a senior and a Lincoln Douglas debater at St. Mary's and is a national qualifier. When he's not doing speech and debate, he runs cross country and he plays guitar. His teammate, Cole Rickey, actually advanced from the preliminary rounds but was unable to join us tonight. So, Colton, thanks very much for representing St. Mary's. Best of luck to you. Next is Jack Cohen. He is head captain of East's debate team, and he is a public forum debater. He loves skiing and hiking, and he helps run the constitutional law program for middle schoolers. Jack defeated his teammate, Max Donovan, in the preliminary rounds. Good luck to you. We have a special panel of experts who will offer their analysis of the debate today. They are Dominic Dezzutti, host of Colorado Decides, the election debate series produced in conjunction with CBS 4. Patricia Calhoun, editor of Westward and weekly Colorado Inside Out panelist. And Natasha Gardner, senior editor of 5280 magazine and also a regular panelist on Colorado Inside Out. Before we get started with our first debate, let's hear from Colton about how competing on his team helps him flex his intellectual muscles.
Really, the entire point of forensics is to have intellectual conversation. Just in one way to another can communicate intellectual ideas, either about what should be happening with politics, or a struggle somebody's going through in a poem, or just how we look at the world and what we find funny is funny. And when you're able to have an intellectual conversation, it opens your minds, just not to your own viewpoint and really taking a mirror to yourself and what you really think, but to other people's viewpoints. It's helped me to become a more rounded person.
Well, Colton tells us he's considering applying to NYU or to Yale, and he's thinking about studying chemical engineering in college. Okay, now Jack will share why he joined the team at East High School.
I joined this debate team because I think that argumentation and critical thinking is really important, not just to high school debate, but to life in general. When I'm getting ready to compete, I feel 50% nervous and 50% really excited. The nerves come from the fact that you never fully know what you're going to experience when you get into a debate round. You never know what your arguments your opponents are going to run or how they're going to respond to the arguments that you've been running. But it's also a lot of excitement because it's something I really love to do. It's a really fun activity, and it's really exciting to be able to get in a round and hear a set of arguments and know how to poke holes in them, know how to refute them, and to be able to effectively communicate all of that to your judge.
Well, Jack is considering Puget Sound as well as Berkeley as a potential college, also Colorado College, maybe in our own state. It's time to set the ground rules right now. Each side will present their case, ask each other questions, and then have a chance to offer rebuttals. When it's finished, we'll go to our illustrious panel for their own questions, and we'll find out whom they felt offered the best arguments. So let's get started right now. The issue up for debate is whether Colorado should allow communities to ban hydraulic fracturing. Let's have our coin flip right now and get underway. So, Colton, I'm going to bring you out, and I'll have you call it. Let's see how we do.
Heads.
And we have tails. So, Jack, you call it. You want affirmative or negative?
I will take the negative.
You'll take the negative. Colton, that means you go first with the affirmative tonight. So, you have the floor now for 3 minutes.
Thank
you.
Go
right ahead.
As of the latest count, Colorado has now approximately 1 active well using hydraulic fracturing or fracking per 100 residents. And every day the wells creep closer to the metropolitan areas along the Colorado Front Range. It's because I support sound environmental policy and the rights of communities, I stand resolved that cities and counties in Colorado should have the right to ban fracking within their boundaries. I'd like to first note that local control has wide political support. Both major major party candidates agree with local control. Glenn advisor Trevor Hauser touted, "We're going to use every authority we have to ensure that local communities are protected." At a Greenlee City Council meeting when fracking was discussed, more than 100 people came to encourage a ban within their community. Boulder, Broomfield, Fort Collins, Lafayette, and Longmont have all voted to ban fracking in a similar way by large margins. It's an issue of organization, making sure that problems within a community can be debated and solved by a community instead of having to go up the chain of command to address the issue of fracking. Most of all, it's important that local communities who receive both the biggest benefits and the biggest consequences of fracking are given a choice if fracking can be a part of their community. My second point today is that fracking has inherent risk. Politico tells us that 2 oil and gas companies with large footprints in the state, Noble and Anadarko, gave more than $11 million this year to protect Colorado. An umbrella group launched to fight the initiatives to allow local control that represents the bulk of more than $15 million that the industry supporters have raised overall. The question is, why did they spend so much money on this? It's because they know that the threat to our environment that fracking poses. Green energy development has slowed, and the increasing use of fracking could cause catastrophic climate change. Because recent scientific studies have shown that fracking operations jeopardize human health and the environment with the introduction of enormous quantities of toxic chemicals into the air, soil, and water, the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, has banned fracking. Vermont has also banned the practice, as have the countries of France, Scotland, and Bulgaria. Fracking for natural gas, as well as the processing, storage, distribution of natural gas releases climate-altering methane into the atmosphere. Over a 100-year period, this methane is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a climate disruptor. Fracking for oil also releases methane, while the consumption of oil is a leading source of the carbon pollution damaging Earth's climate. Climate change threatens our state with more floods, forest fires, and drought, diminishing our natural resources, destroying homes, and placing additional burdens on Colorado taxpayers and water ratepayers. It's important in today's debate that we make sure we respect the sanctity of communities over big businesses and the sanctity of our environment. Clearly, cities and counties in Colorado should have the right to ban fracking within their own boundaries. Thank you.
Colton, thank you very much. And now, Jack, you have 2 minutes for questions and cross-examination. Go ahead.
Awesome. So first, you talked about a study that found that fracking was negative for the environment. Was that study specific to Colorado, or was that overall?
I believe it was overall.
It was overall. So it didn't specifically talk about like fracking that's happening in Colorado right now?
No, but I actually have resources that will tell you what fracking has done to the environment in Colorado with numerous oil spills over the past couple of years.
Awesome. So on your first point about how local control has support, is this support coming from big politicians or from the citizens themselves?
Well, I laid it out in the case for you. It's coming from the citizens themselves, from Broomfield and Boulder and Lafayette and Longmont, who say we do not want fracking.
Well, are the citizens saying that they don't want fracking, or are the citizens saying that they want local municipalities to have the right to choose?
Can you explain this further for me?
Right. So your first part of the point, you say that both politicians on both sides agree that local cities and counties should have the right to choose whether or not they have fracking. Correct. But then in your second point, you say that some citizens, about 100, I think you say, don't want to have fracking. But those are different arguments, right?
They both fit under the same umbrella that local control has wide support. That was only one case in which it has 100. In all these other cases, in Boulder, in Broomfield, in Fort Collins, in Lafayette, and in Longmont, they had very wide margins of people, the local people who have to bear the consequences of fracking, saying we don't want it.
So have those places already voted on fracking, or was that just some people showing up to meetings in support or against fracking?
They already voted on it, and they said it should be banned, but sadly the Colorado Supreme Court said otherwise.
Okay, awesome. So on the last point about risk, shouldn't we prefer an opportunity to rely on fracking right now in order to reduce costs and then eventually switch to green energy instead of banning fracking, which will just push towards coal?
In today's case, I'm not saying that fracking should be banned right now. I'm just saying that local communities should have the opportunity to ban fracking, being that they are the ones bearing the biggest consequences and biggest benefits. And I agree, we should be moving towards green energy. But in cases where people are just not comfortable with fracking, even when they are presented with the pros of it, they should be allowed to ban it.
Thanks.
Thank you for your questions. Right now, the topic up for debate tonight is whether Colorado should allow communities to ban hydraulic fracturing. Jack has the negative. The floor is now yours for 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Today, I negate resolved. cities and counties in Colorado should have the right to ban fracking within their boundaries. My first point is that fracking provides most of the United States energy. The Energy Information Administration explains that U.S. fracking now accounts for more than half of total United States oil output. This allows for cheaper oil prices for Colorado consumers because CNN explains that the fast cycle nature of fracking is one of the reasons that the days of $100 barrels of oil are gone. Lately, oil prices have fallen as low as $25 a barrel. They also explain that this puts a natural cap on the price of oil because it's cheap enough to produce that prices never need to raise too high. In fact, the Institute for Energy Research found statistically that without the U.S. oil production boom from fracking, it is predicted that oil prices would be around $150 a barrel. This means that the United States is saving the global economy about $4.9 billion a day in oil spending. If we take away this massive price drop, Colorado consumers will face the consequences. My second point is that fracking benefits the economy as well as consumers. Catherine Hausman and Ryan Kellogg show that gas bills have dropped $13 billion per year from 2007 to 2013 as a result of increased fracking, which adds up to more than $200 per year per gas-consuming household. Moreover, all types of energy consumers, including commercial, industrial, and electric power consumers, saw economic gains totaling more than $74 billion per year from increased fracking. This means that fracking can save Colorado citizens $200 per year, which is an essential resource. My third point is that fracking allows for an essential bridge to even cleaner energies. The Washington Post explains that fracking can provide a bridge for the United States to eventually switch to cleaner energy sources such as wind and solar. They explain that the much cheaper natural gas will reduce emissions compared to burning coal and will give the United States time to make the switch to green and solar energies. If we ban fracking, we force the use of coal because green technology is too expensive to implement on a broad scale right now. By allowing fracking, we provide a bridge to even better forms of energy. My final point is that bans create uneven policies. If we allow some parts of Colorado to ban fracking while others allow it, we create uneven policies that are very detrimental to Colorado citizens. Because if some counties ban fracking, fracking sites will all center in on the counties that still allow it. This creates crowded areas that could infringe on communities themselves. We should instead ensure that fracking is spread out to avoid impacting communities. Additionally, it's important to remember in this debate that even if we give cities and counties the right to fracking, they won't necessarily ban it. My opponent even agrees with this in our last crossfire. This means that fracking will probably never go away completely in Colorado, so we should do what we can to make it better for communities instead of worsening the effects. For these reasons, I negate.
Jack, thank you very much. Colton, now you have 2 minutes for questions, and your time begins now.
Thank you. I feel like I noticed a bit of a contradiction in your last point of your case. You said that fracking will never really go away, but your third point is how it's a bridge to cleaner energy. Isn't one of the points you're trying to argue for is that we're eventually going to move to cleaner energy sources so we don't have to use a source that is very detrimental to the environment?
Yeah, I apologize. That was badly articulated. What I meant was that even if we allow Colorado cities and counties to ban fracking, they're not unanimously going to vote to ban it, right? So like currently and for the next 5 or 10 years, we're still going to have fracking. But having that fracking allows us the pathway to better green technology, so eventually it will be totally phased out. Does that make sense?
In some respects, yes. I get what you're trying to say.
Okay.
You mentioned a lot of statistics that talk about U.S. oil prices as referring to the entire United States, correct?
Yeah.
And we're talking about one state here. So really, when you talk about the oil boom and the benefits that it's given Coloradoans, wouldn't it not be as bad as you're trying to phrase it, being that you're focusing on effects of the entire United States, and we're talking about one state?
Sure. Well, obviously, I'm not saying that if Colorado bans fracking and all of the oil progress that we've made so far is going to completely go away. But my argument is that we're making incredible progress with fracking, and we're helping Colorado citizens specifically save $200 per year on gas. If we get rid of fracking in Colorado, that price will, A, go up for Colorado specifically because it's going to be more expensive to bring in gas from other places, but B, could create a ripple effect and affect the entire United States. Either way, it hurts Colorado citizens.
Yeah. You mentioned a key number of $200 more per citizen should all these bans come through. But in places like Boulder and Longmont and Lafayette, where they want this ban and they feel like their environment is being jeopardized, don't you think they have a decision when whether it should be fracking and hurting the environment or I have to pay $200 more?
The problem is that A, it's not as clear of a distinction between like fracking hurts the environment and maybe just paying $200 more because there aren't as bad of environmental harms as your case tries to portray. But second, it's important to remember that those harms are going to be reflected onto other communities that don't ban fracking. Thank you.
Colton, thank you very much. Now you have 2 minutes for a rebuttal. Have at it.
All right. So in my opponent's first contention, he talks about how fracking provides energy, and he really focuses on how oil prices have fallen and the U.S. oil boom and how it's had incredible effects. And I agree, fracking is not something that should be thrown away or completely done away with, but I do think it is something that local communities should have a say in, as opposed to people way up the line who have really not a big bearing on what fracking is doing to their communities as the local community does. They should have a say in whether it goes on. And again, he talks about the U.S. oil boom, not the Colorado oil boom. We can't be focusing on the giant effects of the entire United States when we're talking about one state and the local communities within it. His second contention, or point, he talks about how fracking helps the economy. He talks about energy gains and, again, all the great things about fracking. And again, nobody is saying that fracking is a bad thing here or should be done away with. And he talks about this $200 per citizen more should Colorado go through with this. But I think there are lots of people in these communities who are willing to pay that $200 to see that their environment is not hurt. He said in the last crossfire that I'm exaggerating about the effects of fracking. I'm not. You just need to look at places like North Dakota and Oklahoma where there is 2 earthquakes a day, and it's accepted by the government there that has a scientific link to the amount of fracking. Continuing this process or not allowing local communities to ban it could have disastrous, catastrophic effects, as I stated in my first speech. And his third, he talked about how it is a bridge to cleaner energy. And I agree with this too. We can't just switch on a dime from this to cleaner energy. But the thing is, not allowing it to be banned is not going to help us get to cleaner energy any faster. It's going to actually make us more dependent on fracking as it becomes just the accepted norm. And finally, he says that the ban will result in uneven policy. Again, the reason the ban is not going to be enforced among all people is so that local communities can solve these problems on their own, in their own selective ways, allowing for a better way. Thank you.
Colton, thank you very much. The topic we're discussing tonight, fracking bans in local communities. That's the topic up for tonight's debate. Jack, you have the negative. You now have 3 minutes to respond and close. Go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. So let's move on first to talk about my opponent's case. So first, he talks about how local control has support from big politicians. And while to an extent we should look at what big politicians are talking about, that shouldn't be the only thing in the round. He moves on to talk about how citizens support fracking, but that's not the same as citizens supporting local control over fracking. So instead of looking at what maybe 100 citizens think about fracking, we should instead look at the opportunity to A, stop bigger climate change, and B, help everybody in Colorado economically. Second, let's move on to talk about his argument about risk and how he talks about how there has been $11 million sent to protect Colorado. The problem is that he gives you absolutely no rationale as to why this money isn't just being given to support the environment, right? He just says that when we give money to the environment, it's because these companies think that they're doing something wrong. But he doesn't give any explanation of what's going wrong in Colorado. The arguments that he cites in his last speech are from Oklahoma and North Dakota, but he never specifically talks about Colorado. And it's important to remember that the National Academy of Sciences did a study specifically in Colorado and found that the harms that many attribute to fracking are actually because of faulty gas wells and not fracking itself. So when we fix these faulty gas wells, which will be done when we actually allow all counties in Colorado to frack, we will actually get rid of these problems, which means that the impacts that he's talking about don't really happen. Overall, we can get rid of the harms better by switching to green energy, and fracking provides the bridge to do this. Because when we ban fracking, we're going to switch to coal, which will further pollute the environment and exacerbate all of the harms that he talks about when he talks about pollution. But then, let's move on to talk about what he said in response to my case. First, when he talked on my first point about how fracking provides energy to the United States, all he said is that fracking is not something that's going to be done away with. But that's the exact problem, is because when we allow some cities to ban fracking, the fracking operations that currently happen in Colorado will just move to the other ones that still allow it, which centralizes the effects that he says are so bad. But then, let's go on to the economy. He says that communities are willing to pay this extra $200, but first, he never actually cites any source that says that citizens are willing to do this. But second, remember the fact that the harms aren't just from Colorado, because the National Academy of Sciences say that there aren't these environmental harms that he's talking about specifically related to Colorado. This means that there's no trade-off that citizens have to make, and when we ban fracking, we're just going to increase the cost of gas. But then finally, let's talk about the bridge to clean energy, which is going to be an incredibly important argument in the round. If we allow some cities and counties in Colorado to ban fracking, they will inevitably switch to coal for energy, which further hurts green energy development. Instead, we should prefer fracking, which allows a cheap natural gas resource right now that can be phased out in 5 to 10 years when natural gas improves. Finally, on how uneven policies hurt, he just says that citizens should have the right to choose. But remember the fact that if some cities ban fracking, it just means that those fracking operations are going to be pushed to the cities that don't, whether for economic reasons or for other reasons, which will inevitably hurt their communities even more. For these reasons, I can only see a negative ballot.
Thank you very much, Jack. And finally, Colton, your close. You have the affirmative on the question of should Colorado communities be allowed to ban hydraulic fracturing? Go ahead.
All right, I want to say two things in response to my opponent for my final speech. One, he says that there's no specific consequences to Colorado. This is false. According to a article by, I believe, the Denver News, oil and gas operators have on average spilled 200 gallons of petroleum chemicals per day over the past decade in Colorado. Over 700,000 gallons of toxic liquids have remained in Colorado soil after initial cleanup, often contaminating groundwater. Now, that's partly destruction of private property. So when he talks about the bridge to cleaner energy and how this will not allow that and banning it will result in coal, the fact is that when people's private property are being destroyed, they will want to switch to coal. Coal is not destroying their private property, and coal is not actually going to cause earthquakes as fracking might if it's allowed to continue. Again, he talks about how some will ban, and this will just create a concentration of fracking. This is wrong, being that there's a science to this. There are shells in places where the oil is and places where the oil isn't. If they're told to be banned, they will simply leave. They don't have anywhere else to go. Where they go in Colorado is into the northeast, the Barta shell, where all the oil is located. The thing about this is that if they're banned from that region, they don't have anywhere else to go. The fact is that fracking will be stopped in that region, and the local communities will be validated. They will not be shot down by a Colorado Supreme Court. And for this reason, I must stand in affirmation today. Thank you.
Colton, Barta, Jack Cohen, thank you very much for a great spirited debate. Let's go to our panel of experts, get their thoughts now on what they saw. Dominic, this one didn't make it to the ballot, but maybe it should have if these guys were arguing it.
I think if these guys were in charge, they would have made it to the ballot. You both offered a great debate on a really contentious issue in Colorado. Let's get some questions from our expert panel here. Patty, we'll start with you for our affirmative case with Colton.
Well, Colton, so it didn't make the ballot, but would you have preferred to see all Coloradans be able to vote on whether to ban fracking in the state or leave it at the local level?
I would leave it at the local level.
Natasha?
If a ban was put in place in a community, it's just a boundary. A watershed might move over that boundary. What would you say to that sort of argument, this question of how do we ban it in one place even though the geological effect might be for a much larger area?
Sorry, my voice is hoarse after that. I would say that as these watersheds happening, it becomes kind of a movement, and it grows and grows until fracking becomes eventually so unpopular that it's banned.
Let's get a couple questions for Jack. Again, Patty, we'll start with you.
Okay, Jack, let's return to the bridge you're talking about, that fracking would provide a bridge. How do you make sure that that people cross that bridge to then go on to greener energy?
Unfortunately, there's no specific way to ensure this happens. But when we ban fracking in certain cities and counties, we switch back to coal, which just takes steps in the wrong direction. So I think that we should instead allow fracking to happen so that eventually that bridge can occur instead of just taking steps backwards.
Natasha?
Sticking with the geology concept, locally and in Colorado, there's so much diversity from community to community. Wouldn't they be the ones who know best how their ground and their water resources work?
Absolutely. Well, communities do know best specifically how their ground and water resources work. The problem is that if one community over here bans fracking, it forces those companies to go to other places because fracking is incredibly expensive, which means that they can't just pick up and leave the entire state. So they're eventually just going to go to other communities that might not want that sudden influx of companies.
Alan, clearly we're going to need just a couple seconds here to decide who's won this great debate.
I understand you do. All right. Thank you very much, Dominic. We're going to give our panel a moment to consider whom they felt won that debate. And that gives me a moment to let you know that this is one of 8 different debates we're presenting this season. To check all of them out, you can go to cpt12.org/election. And our winner tonight will go on to compete in our final round, November 6th at 9:30. Right here on Channel 12. So, panel, I know it's tough, but do you have a decision? Dominic?
We do indeed. Again, gentlemen, both provided a great debate on a contentious issue. At the end of the day, it was a very close call, but we felt Jack had the better argumentation when it comes down to it. Congratulations on making the championship round, and Colton, we'll look forward to seeing you in the third place match.
All right, congratulations to Jack Cohen and Colton Barta. Thank you very much tonight. You both gave our viewers a wonderful debate. You both should be very proud. And Jack, you now go on to that final round where we will crown a 2016 Both Sides of the Story champion. And we'll get to see more of Colton as well in our third place matchup that comes up November 4th at 9 p.m. That's all we have time for tonight in our program. I want to thank our excellent students for accepting our challenge and participating in our debate. I also want to thank our esteemed panel for sharing their thoughts. And finally, thank you for tuning in. It is the support of viewers like you and our sponsors that help make this show a reality. If you're looking for more information about this program or about the Colorado Decides debate series, please go to our website, cpt12.org/election and cbsdenver.com. And you can catch me every morning on CBS 4 for all the latest news and information about this year's election and issues. For everybody here at Colorado Public Television, I'm Alan Janae. Thanks for watching, and that is Both Sides of the Story.